Arteta! What a strike! What a screamer!
Zola! What a fantastic goal! Arsenal back in it!
And here's Limpar, lines it up, finds the net. Arsenal in front.
And it's Arsenal. Arsenal FC. We're by far the greatest second half team the world has ever seen. This is the Arsenal Vision post-match podcast. My name is Elliot Smith. You can block me on Twitter at Yankee Gunner. That was my least inspired intro, but it's going to be a very inspired podcast. We are by far the greatest second half team the world has ever seen. Not too bad a first half team either, if I do say so myself. We cunted those cunts all the way back to the home they don't have. It was brilliant. It's a 4-2 victory in the North London derby. And here to talk about it is Tim. You can find him on Twitter at Stoberto. Hello, Tim.
Hello there.
And Paul, you can find him on Twitter at Positive My Pants. Hi, Paul.
Woohoo!
And Clive, you can find him on Twitter at ClivePAFC. Hello, Clive.
Hello, hello.
Hello, indeed. Hey, we've got Scott down the line. We've got lingerie down the line as well. And you know what? I want to put on some lingerie and watch a video of that game over and over and over again, because that is my idea of a sexy evening. It had everything. It had shithousing. It had fights. It had Dele Alli getting shown up by Aaron Ramsey. It had Eric Dyer shushing the crowd only to wind up making a complete fucking fool of himself. It was brilliant, and we're going to cover everything that made it brilliant. And I guess maybe the first place to start is just with what it was like to be there at the Emirates. So many of you listening may have been there, and many of you were not. And so Tim, as always, except when he's not, was there. Tim, I really have just two quick questions about the atmosphere. First of all is just the general one. For you, how was the atmosphere? And maybe just a little bit, you know, how did the in-the-ground supporters respond to going behind?
Yeah, it was absolutely rocking. The atmosphere's been much better this season anyway. You know, I'm not saying like the Emirates has been, this like completely raucous, but it's definitely been a lot more positive, a lot more together. People trying to see the good things. Everything we lost in the last couple of years, but yeah, I mean this time it was even bigger and even better. And, you know, we started very quickly and that got people up and we got the early goal. And actually, I think the equaliser might have knocked the stuffing out of the atmosphere had it not been for the melee that followed it, which kept everyone a little bit pumped. So, it was one of, if not the best atmospheres I've experienced since the stadium opened.
Yeah, that's
great. Do you think
great.
it was a turning point, Tim? Do you think going forward, ordinary teams coming to the Emirates will now start to feel it's a fortress to some degree?
It's funny that you should ask that, Paul, because I have written here, ask Tim, does he feel like this turned Arsenal's stadium into more of a fortress? So I'd be very curious to get an answer to that. Yeah.
Well, the thing is, our record at home over the last couple of years is absolutely brilliant anyway. Yeah. And that's a little bit why I've kind of thought that some of the Arsenal are completely different, completely transformed, has been slightly overdone. I think we're slowly going in the right direction. But, you know, we beat Spurs by 2 goals last season. You know, we drew with Liverpool last season. All these games that have been fated as these massive turning points and evidence that everything is different. And you look at last season, which was shit, don't get me wrong, but and at home we were pretty peerless actually. It was, you know, we had that one unlucky loss to United and it was only City that took us apart at home. And maybe if you look at it like Liverpool maybe was half a turning point, even though I felt that performance was a little bit overrated. But yeah, I think so, in terms of because nobody's really spoken about how formidable we are at home, just because the perception of Arsenal, the word formidable doesn't come to mind in the last couple of years, even though we've been
results last year were brilliant,
exactly,
but it didn't feel. And the support would kind of come and wane. And then the other thing I thought on the support that I thought was different this time is we've totally seemed to have calmed down about playing out from the back, which is not a minor point. That's talking to confidence and trusting the team and getting behind the team. So I'm just kind of hoping that this game, the penny dropped for everybody, that, you know, when you get behind the team, even when it's doing hairy things or struggling a little bit, you might just get a result here if you get behind them.
Yeah, and you can see how a lot of the players reacted, and I think it all fed off of each other. I think a few of the players were maybe not surprised so much, but there wasn't a lot of derby experience in that team, and a lot of them, you look at some of the, I know it's social media and there's an element of veneer, but you look at some of their posts, and I've just been wondering about, like, Aubameyang, for example, what he's made of, because he's been playing for Borussia Dortmund, and that's what he's been used to for the last couple of years. And then I think about some of these guys we've bought from Germany who've been used to the Bundesliga atmospheres and have come over here, and I wonder if they think to themselves privately, maybe even subconsciously, like, whoa, this is seriously not what I'm used to. But you could see guys like Aubameyang, Kolasinac, you really felt like they thought, oh wow, this crowd can do this. It's not like they're incapable. And I think the players fed off of that, and then just when there could have been a lull, the crowd fed off the players again with the kind of little melee at 1-1, and yeah, it was superb. It was a proper, everyone was at one, and nothing unites people like a common enemy.
Yeah.
And I think the players really got it. You look at, like, Lucas Torreira's goal celebration. He can't speak English. He's only been here for 3 months, and yet you could see how much it meant to him. And I'm sure that's not because someone showed him a DVD of, like, a Tony Adams header or something. Like, that's something that even probably the day before the game, he probably thought, well, yeah, okay, it's a derby. I've played in, like, Samp Genoa derbies, and they're pretty serious. But you could tell that, like, the players felt it. And that's something I think you only really get once you're actually out there and on the pitch.
Yeah, and look, there is an attitude, I think, that people say, you need these players in the team that understand what the derby is about, and there may be some truth to that, but the reality is that when you get a fight like that and you get the players going after one another, suddenly they're not just playing for the club, but they're playing for their teammates. And there seems to be some real great camaraderie in this squad. And so I think the fight was a galvanizing moment, because now, everyone was standing up for one another. And that's something that maybe we haven't seen in the past. I think at some of the low points in prior seasons, you'd see one of our players get tackled roughly or picked on by another team, and there'd be no one surrounding that player defending him. And everybody was in to this fight, defending their teammates, and that was great to see. I want to get to the actual football now, though, and I'm going to give a quick programming note here. The Mesut Ozil thing is important enough to discuss. It is not important enough, in my mind, in the context of this performance and this victory, to put at the top of the show. So what we'll do is we'll backload that, and assuming that we're not at the 3.5 hour mark when we get to it, we will talk about the Mesut Ozil thing, because I think it is relevant. He is certainly an important part of this team and this club. But in the meantime, let's talk about the players that were actually there and what happened. And so, Clive, one of the things that was interesting, obviously, is that we chose to start with a back three. And it was a very similar setup to what we did against Bournemouth. And on this podcast, we sort of wondered, or I certainly wondered, whether the Bournemouth lineup was picked with an eye towards this game. And I was very impressed with that Bournemouth performance, and I thought that it was maybe an audition for how he wanted to set up for this game. So, I mean, do you now, in retrospect, think that maybe that's exactly what he was planning, and were you surprised to see him go with the back three for this one?
No. I think I said it last week that we'd go probably the same team, right? So I think it's the best way to maximise this squad at the moment, and I think the Monreal Kolasinac thing has really been a deciding factor, and I think the Danny Welbeck thing has been a deciding factor. This is the best way to keep offensive strength on the pitch while not having to have two forwards on the pitch at all times. And I thought the Bournemouth performance really worked. I really wanted it to work, because I think it suits his team. I think it suits the team during, what I said previously, what are the points accumulation month of December, when we have lots of games close together. I just think it's quite a simplistic formation that's very simple to play. It makes people feel comfortable. You have good exit strategies. You have the interior of the pitch well covered, and you can play with a 3-4-2-1 or a 3-4-1-2. Very, very easy. Change dynamics to the players, and away you go. And that's what he did in this game. And I think what he's doing right now is a masterclass. And I did say the Bournemouth game was the best tactically he's been, and now he's done it again. And I really feel strongly that he is producing something tactically every single week that has nuance to it. But I hear what Tim's saying about, are we overreacting? And I think I take my mind back to a lot of his interviews that he's given, and he's continually talking about the connection with the fans, and I think that's what he's trying to get through to the players. He's trying to get them to realise their importance and how we can connect this club back to the fan base. If you were interviewing for that job when he was interviewing for that job, there would have been 4 or 5 things that you would have to do to get that job. And connecting to the fans, given how divided we were for the last 3-4 years, has got to be number one on that list. It has to be. And what we're seeing now is a connection, and everything that's been done on the pitch, Emery's conversations off the pitch, how he acts off the pitch, everything is done for me to bring that gap closer. And I saw that in the players. I saw a ferocity in the players to give the fans their day. You know, and I haven't seen that or felt that. You can even see it from the first penalty. If you look at the players in the background when that penalty was awarded, it was early in the game, and you just see Xhaka, Mustafi, you see them just absolutely fully pumped up, celebrating it before it's gone in. Goal, we're off and running, right in front of their fans. And I just felt this massive appreciation and empathy that we're here for you now, and we're going to give absolutely everything we've got. And I thought that came through yesterday, and we all enjoyed it, no doubt.
Yeah, I mean, the effort and intensity, look, we have a lot of quality in our squad, and I think you could make an argument that we have not just a better, but a much better squad than Tottenham, unless you read the combined 11s in the English press, which I wonder how many of those combined 11s are entirely Spurs squads now. But in addition to the quality, there was a tremendous amount of application in this game. And Paul, one of the things that was so easy to spot was the first 20 minutes of this game, they couldn't get room to breathe. They didn't have a second to pass the ball. They were giving the ball away. We were taking the ball off them. We were pressing them intensely. And, the thing that I'm starting to work on as a theory here with Emery is that one of the things that makes him so different is he identifies the strength of the opposition, and then he sets us up in a way that nullifies what they do really well. And Spurs are a really good pressing team. They're not a great football playing team. And Clive talked about it on the last podcast about, how you can get at them and they don't like to necessarily play the football. And they really do. You see it. Some of their most effective attacks were just quick restart long balls from dead ball, foul situations, set pieces, things like that. I think by playing the back three, by not trying to necessarily build from the back and play possession football, we really nullified where Spurs can hurt you. You look at the Chelsea match, and Chelsea want to play a lot of football, play a lot of passes, build from the back. We didn't give them that. We didn't give them the opportunity to create those chances and transitions. We pressed the crap out of them. So, were you impressed with the intensity of the pressing early in the game? You've talked a lot this season about how we're not a pressing side, but in this game, we not only did it, but we did it better than the team that's known for it.
Yeah, well, that's a very subtle way, I think, once again, of pointing out how you said something earlier on that turned out to be correct.
I didn't think it was subtle. It was totally intended. In fact, I'm going to do that more when we come on to Aubameyang, I promise you. So if you like that part of the podcast, stay tuned.
Yeah, you had posited that maybe we're a pressing team against the big teams because we did it against City and Chelsea, and then we basically didn't do it for a long time. And my theory was, now we tried pressing, he decided to drop it. It was just coincidence. It was against the bigger teams. He decided to drop it because he decided we weren't very good at it, and we had other problems to fry, other fish to fry. We had to sort out the defense and the midfield, and he wasn't going to have half our team stuck in their final third when he hadn't even worked out our defensive midfield. Maybe I was right, and it's just coincidentally when we came back to the big teams, he thought we were ready for it. But it would appear that we press against the big guys, and the first 20 minutes was just electric. We swept them off the pitch for 20 minutes. Now, as we've seen with other teams, there can be a dip after that, and maybe as we're new to this game, we let that that drop-off come a little too precipitously and a little too suddenly, because they then own the next 20 minutes. What I thought, to pick up on Clive's point on this, I thought it was fascinating that during our 20 minutes, when we were knocking them about both sides of the head, you still saw clips of Emery and his right-hand man taking out charts and discussing the problems, and me thinking, but we don't have any problems. But they were obviously seeing the seeds of where our vulnerabilities were. So that mentally they obviously had a bunch of scenarios, because that was a prepared piece of paper they had in front of them. So we out-tactic against Howe, and every move we made was ahead of the move that Pochettino made, or superior to his moves. Clive talked about the different formations, but we were always kind of one step ahead. Once we came back from that 20-minute lull, we ended the half strong, and then we made significant changes twice in the second half in responding to injuries as well. So I think this was an incredibly more impressive than Liverpool and against Bournemouth in terms of our tactical changes. He was right on this, and I think you're right. You can't be that prepared if you didn't start a week out with the Bournemouth game. It's clear that he rested basically everybody for this game coming into this, and yet still had the subs on the halftime changeover that totally changed or totally revamped our front line, and took us onto a new level. I mean, you look back on it in hindsight, and it's just brilliant management.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting? So Tim, I actually thought as I watched this that the subs were pre-planned, the halftime subs. Because while I don't think Iwobi and Mkhitaryan were fantastic, I certainly don't think you would have looked at them and said, they're bad, we have to get them off, we have to get on Lacazette and Ramsey because they're bad. I think Iwobi and Mkhitaryan ran their asses off. They were super intense in their press, and they were running the channels nonstop. That was clearly the plan. Overlap. Bellerin had 2 through balls in the game. Kolasinac had 2 through balls in the game. The plan was press intensely, using those 2 wide forwards, and then have them run the channels for the overlaps. And I wonder if maybe he was thinking, they can give me 100% for 45 minutes. Give me 90 minutes worth of effort in 45 minutes. Then I'll bring in 2 new guys, and we'll do it all over again. Now, to be fair, we probably needed the extra goal scorer on, because we were behind at halftime. But I'm curious to get your thoughts on the use of Iwobi and Mkhitaryan, and the extent to which that maybe a change like that might have been in his mind even before the game started.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the changes were pre-planned. I'm not convinced he maybe as early as half time. I think had we been 1-0 up, maybe he wouldn't have quite done that, and it was a reaction a little bit to going 2-1 behind. But I mean, look, he's got Ramsey and Lacazette on the bench. I mean, they weren't ever going to stay on the bench for long, and I think you're quite right. I think the message would have been very much right, put absolutely everything into this, because he might have been thinking 55, 60 minutes for Iwobi and Mkhitaryan, and whether he planned it to be a double sub or whether, I think those changes would have been made by hook or by crook. Maybe he ended up making them 10 minutes earlier, but I agree with you. I think that was pre-planned, and Emery seemed to reference that in his post-match. He said something about, I had scenarios prepared.
Yeah, saw that.
And whether he meant I had a scenario prepared for if we were a goal down, or like you said, he already had this planned anyway. But it's a really good, clever tactical switch that I've said a few times over the last few weeks. I think some things have been only slightly overplayed, only slightly, and I reiterate, I've got no problem with that. I'm happy with people looking a little bit on the sunny side, but this time I really like, I'm on that hype train this time. I think the manager won us this game, both with we played 3 different formations during the course of this game, and that did not look awkward to these players at all. They looked like they knew what they were doing every step of the way. With it, and maybe after the first half an hour, it was a little bit natural that we faded a little bit. I'm not convinced we faded so much as maybe deliberately took a little bit of a step off. But I mean, when you've got players like Ramsey and Lacazette on the bench, both of whom are A, really good, and B, have that proper high end, are fully capable of doing that high energy kind of thing, and it was. it's been gone over quite a lot, but it was a lovely change because it completely ruffled Spurs. They thought they'd worked us out, and I thought they had as well. I got worried at 2-1. I thought the game was slipping away from us. I thought Spurs had settled into it. I thought they'd sussed us. And then, that lovely change to completely just invert that front three, give them a completely different problem, splitting, Lacazette and Aubameyang, getting them running into the channels and Ramsey running into the middle. It worked perfectly, and Spurs had no answer to it. And one of the common criticisms I've seen of Pochettino this year is that he doesn't make subs well, even though he's got a slightly deeper squad now. Most of his substitution, he didn't make a sub in this game till the 79th minute. And they weren't completely bereft. They had players like Lucas Moura on the bench. I don't know if Eric Lamela was on the bench as well, but they had players there available, and he just didn't react. And whether it was exactly plotted out for 45 minutes, I'm not sure, but I definitely think those changes for those personnel were definitely planned plenty in time for the last portion of the game.
Yeah, and I love the idea of giving them a different problem to solve, because to your point, Mkhitaryan and Iwobi are ball-dominant players who did a lot of good work on the ball, and then you bring on two new players, and the problem for Spurs became much more the off-the-ball running, which is a very different way I have to defend and a different problem to try to solve. So, you're totally changing their sort of sat-nav or their GPS of where the players are going to be and how to follow them. I thought it worked brilliantly. And Clive, I'm curious to get your thoughts really quickly before we move on to some of the incidents and some of the really top performances, but of Mkhitaryan and Iwobi and how they were used. I mean, both of these players for me in this game got into good positions and maybe just didn't have quite the quality at the end of it that was needed to make the difference, because in that first 20 minutes when we were dominant, I thought we needed and probably deserved another goal and didn't quite get it. And then we had a lull, a 15-minute period that kind of ironically, it was when we had the ball more. I thought we really missed the extra man in midfield during the down period where they came back into the game, because Torreira or Xhaka would get the ball and they were struggling to progress it a little, and we just looked a little outnumbered in midfield. And the only time in the match where I felt that was that period where we were in a lull. But overall, I mean, how do you feel Mkhitaryan and Iwobi did in the half that they had to play those roles?
I thought they did fine. I thought on Mkhitaryan, I thought he was steady, as he always is. Nothing spectacular, did some good things. Iwobi, I've a little issue with him. He's just like a little bit of conviction after the dribble. What he's doing is doing a dribble, but he hasn't got the next picture in his mind. And he's having to check a few times and push the ball safely. He's got ability on the ball, no problem. And if he'd have scored that cutback goal, we wouldn't be saying anything. We'd have gone into half-time potentially 2-0 up, and we'd all been very, very happy. And I sort of agree with what you're saying about substitutions. I think most managers know their substitutions before they go out. They're planned. They know what they're going to do. The timing may change. I think with this one, and Emery said it himself, when he asked about substitutions, he sort of said, I wanted to change something. And the power of substitution is great, because what you're doing is you're now controlling the story of the game. You're now getting the other team to react to you. So by getting a substitution in first, you make them react. As I said last week, the big thing for me was the big difference between this Tottenham team and last year's Tottenham team was Moussa Dembele. There was nobody there to give them that control in the centre of the pitch. And I did sort of say to you that we can press them in the middle of the pitch, because Sissoko, Dyer and Winks are not press resistant. They're not very clever on the ball.
Or good at football. Just full stop.
They're just not good. They're good in go forward
football.
All right.
Oh, yeah, I'll debate that with you as long as you like, right? So and what they're good at is good times when they're going forward. So when they control the story and they're pushing the ball into areas where they want to be, they are a very good team. They're a team that needs the game in front of them. And the only period of the game when I felt they were good was when Son got in 2 or 3 times. When they got him in behind us and got us running backwards, then they looked like Spurs. That's the only point like Spurs had on set pieces. The rest of it, we dominated that game. And Son was their best player for me, the only player that caused any sort of danger. And once we got through that patch, and then we scored the goals and we controlled the story, they were done, because they had nowhere else to go. They couldn't get the ball into areas because we were so aggressive, we were so ferocious. We pushed them back, and we now had them in areas where they didn't want to be with players that have names, but they're not that good. I mean, Aurier. I mean, seriously.
He's bad. He's just a bad player. He's not good at all. And I thought that was a big part of their vulnerability.
He just we spoke. We're such a left-sided biased attacking team with Kolasinac. That was always going to happen. Now they played that guy Foyth. Well, I don't know what he is, right? And Vertonghen has just come back from injury, and he looked like he was about to cry the whole game. And Davis was completely. He was intimidated by Kolasinac and every bit of broken play, and he didn't want it neither. And I'm hearing about these Spurs back four. Rubbish. Absolutely rubbish.
Where was Alderweireld or whatever? Was he? Is he injured or suspended?
No, he was arrested.
People talk about these two players, and they are good players. But you know what? I got a theory here, right? There's a problem at Spurs. They're reaching their ceiling, and their biggest issue happened in the summer. And it wasn't the fact they didn't buy anybody. The issue was they didn't sell three players. They wanted to sell Rose, they wanted to sell Dembele, they wanted to sell Alderweireld for 140 million quid. And the rest of the league has woken up to the fact that Spurs are very good at recruitment. We're not going to buy their players and give them lots of money so they can come and beat us. We're going to let their players stay on their silly little contracts, and we're going to come and get them for free. That's what's happening right now. That's why that's why they're slowly but surely having to reintegrate these players they would have normally sold. And that's why there's a disenfranchising within their dressing room. And as soon as they have a bit of pressure coming up in the next few weeks, I think they could go. I
have to correct you just real quick, though. They don't actually have a dressing room because they don't have a stadium. So technically, there's no problem in their dressing room. They just don't have one.
I think they could go. I really do, and I think we're gonna go past Spurs, and we're gonna obviously hopefully stay ahead of Manchester United, and that's where the top four situation is going to come from. So again, going back to the substitutions piece, I just think what we did was control the story by making a change, and that change could have been anything. But we have to make a change, so they have to react to us. Once they're reacting to us, we are controlling it. The first time I saw that really at close quarters was in the Fergie days when he used to have York and Cole, when it wasn't going good, Shane and Solskjaer, and you had to beat them twice. You literally had to beat them twice. If you beat them once, no chance. You got to beat us again. And that's what we're doing now. You got to beat us twice. You got to beat the first team, then we go again, and with the second team, and we drive you into the ground late in games. And I, for one, am enjoying it.
Yeah, I mean, it was great to see. I just felt that all over the pitch, you could see that Spurs are physical, they're aggressive, and they know how to play direct, quick transition football, but they don't play technically skillful, adept football. And we put them in situations where they had to play out and they couldn't do it. I mean, Paul, real quick, the midfield matchup, I thought we won it well. We're going to get to Torreira's performance later, so I don't want to touch on that yet. But I mean, do you have sort of a quick thought on how we were able to outclass them in that area of the pitch?
Yeah, bloody do. So when you looked at the Spurs-Chelsea game, Dele Alli played a key role pressuring Jorginho. And he played the same role in this game, and he didn't get his claws either into Xhaka or to Torreira. We're going to talk about them both a little later, but I thought that was key. We can discuss why that might be. But the fact is, they didn't... we see Xhaka having this Achilles heel. We know Torreira's good. They did not get a claw into either player at any point in the game, including when we played out from the game, from the back. We played out from the back. We also went direct. We went long. They didn't know what the fuck was going on. Ali had absolutely zero impact on us, and I would love to have another crack at Chelsea right now. I think we're a different team.
Yeah, the thing I think that is obvious to me about why that was and why this was such a smart play is Torreira and Xhaka were 5-10 yards further up the pitch than Spurs expected them to be because we were playing with a back three. And so the defenders were playing out to the wing backs or breaking the lines through to Xhaka and Torreira, who were 10 yards further up the pitch. They were nowhere near Dele Alli. Jorginho was dropping
Torreira and Xhaka work as well. That's the other thing,
well,
right?
Yeah, unlike the Conte-Jorginho situation that they've got going on there. So Paul, just real quick, couple of incidents. First of all, their penalty. I mean, I can't see how it's a penalty. I mean, NBC in the United States went Zapruder film on it and showed that like one stud of Holdings touched the top of Son's boot. It's a dive for me. Do you have any maybe blame for holding there, though, with sort of what, the stay on your feet, son, old adage? I mean, he shouldn't be diving in like that, and that gives the referee a decision, or do you just feel it's a botched call by Mike Dean?
I want to be very, very unpopular with all Gooners, so I actually think it's fine as a penalty, because I don't judge penalties with a microscope. I judge penalties by would it normally be given, and if that was given to us, I would have said we put the pressure on him, there was contact, he came flying in, fuck him. So I'm sorry.
So you will give Holding some blame there, right? Then I mean that he doesn't need to go sliding like that, and that gives the referee the opportunity to make a call.
I will give him 75% of the blame for that being a penalty. Sorry.
No problem. So then when they put the penalty away and Dyer shushes the crowd and that was the second goal. Sorry,
I love it.
Yeah, I mean, and then the fight breaks out. I mean, two things. First of all, what do you think of the Arsenal response to that melee, to that situation, and how influential do you think it was in the attitude that we saw from the team going forward?
It was great, and if you want to know the impact Lichtsteiner has on the dressing room, I mean, he's right in there. He's the first guy I see on camera. He is the shithouser. And you put players like him and Socrates and Xhaka, and those guys don't back down. It's delicious to see Ramsey being so engaged in the game, because after all, he could be nursing an injury somewhere or throwing a moody. And when the man's called on, the guy's fucking ready. But he's already ready at during the incident on the touchline, and they're all there. And then you bring the intensity that Torreira brings on the pitch, which I think relates to, it's all a continuation of we're not going to give you a moment's fucking rest. We're not going to back off anything. We're going to turn a negative, as Tim talked about, conceding the goal, into what they went and did was they aligned the crowd, the players, and the squad to say, right, fuck the score. We're fucking furious. We're coming at you. And, they lit a fire, and it might carry us through this whole season, and it might have been the thing that turned their season, as Clive talked about. It certainly has it teetering. There's definitely cracks in that squad and in that team in that situation, and this is a competition against the top four. They delightfully took 3 points off Chelsea last week. I wasn't so happy about it then, but right now it's a 3-way tie, and as I say, give us another crack at Chelsea. So I think that fucking touchline incident may be the thing you could look at in 2020 hindsight that lit the fire.
And you know what it reminded me of? Just the whole game reminded me a tiny little bit of a microcosm of that game at the end of the season a couple seasons ago, where Spurs totally lost it against Chelsea and went completely mental and imploded. They can get rattled. And, they love to make snide fouls and, dive in with their studs up and take dives in the box, but they don't like it up them. I mean, they definitely don't like getting it back. They don't like the physicality. They don't like the dark arts. I mean, the way they went after Xhaka for going down a little easier. I mean, how rich is that? It's like they've been throwing themselves to the ground all game. And it's hilarious watching Eriksen totally lose his rag over that. So I thought that moment was really important, because I think it affected Spurs' mentality. I think they lost focus, and I think it galvanized the Arsenal fight back. But, just real quick, Paul, before I move on to Tim, I mean, we don't need to kill him because we won the game, but do you think Leno holds most of the blame, other than the referee, for not seeing the offside, but for their second goal, or is that maybe a little harder than people are giving him credit for?
Well, not most of it, but, as the classic footballing phrase, he'll feel he could have done better, is another way of saying, yeah, he fucked that one up.
Yeah.
But, hey, the good side of it was we always expected Leno would fuck one up at some point. It didn't matter. In fact, it played into the narrative that we went, in a derby against Spurs, we like to go down and then come back and smash them. We tend to lose or draw the first half, so it'll all be washed away as got it out of his system. He could have done better, but so could the forward man on the line. I mean, we let them have a free run at it. It was all so soft. That whole the free kick. I mean, you can attribute blame along the way. He had the hardest part of the job. Leno did. So I wouldn't give him most of the blame, but maybe the biggest hand up on it. Yeah.
And if you want to pick on the defenders a little bit in this match, maybe they just gave away one too many free kicks, than were necessary. Socrates in particular was guilty of maybe taking an extra little nip at the Spurs players. But Tim, this is
the
Yeah.
Just quickly, the coaching message there is the front post zone. The front post zone, we're protecting it with Torreira. That's not really good. You can see the big wheelie bin wardrobe Dyer's big chest behind him. You're thinking that matchup doesn't look quite right. And we didn't protect that front post zone Giroud style as we used to in the past. So I think there'll be changes on set pieces going forward to make sure
you
that.
know me, I love a striker whose best quality is defending set pieces. Tim, this is the section of the podcast where I break out the moisturizer and get comfortable. Let's talk about Aubameyang. You know, I have been one of his biggest supporters this season. A player I love, admitted at times that when he's been played on the left wing, I think we've needed more from him, that I've wanted to see him at center forward. There are people that have gotten in touch, as you might say, to suggest I don't think he's got it, mate. I think he doesn't get involved enough. He doesn't influence the game enough. He's maybe not tough enough for the Premier League. This, for me, was his most complete performance at Arsenal. This was everything he can do. He led us in tackles. He scored a sensational goal that is of the highest quality, not just a tap in at the near post or anything like that. And I thought his running absolutely terrorized Spurs, but his pressure from the front, I think, made them all kinds of uncomfortable. I was so impressed with his performance. Do you just sort of want to give me your appraisal of his overall performance, that second goal that he scores, and in general, you know, where you think we can go with him as our striker?
Yeah, I thought it was his best performance for Arsenal by quite a way. Actually, he was far more involved, but you know, I think part of that was a little bit here, like a lot of the players, just seemed to have that extra 2 or 3% for the derby, and that can go either way. You can go too far with that, and you can play with your heart instead of your head. But I felt he was just full of running, and Spurs couldn't really live with him. But I also felt that the structure around him was just played to his strengths. For like both systems, we played for most of the game. So, you know, he's got, like we said about the Bournemouth game, he's got 2 fairly high touch players behind him who are also looking to force turnovers. And if you've got Aubameyang up front, you know, he played for Borussia Dortmund, right? It doesn't take a genius to work out that if you put a couple of players behind him who are going to force turnovers, he's going to have some fun with that. But also, I think what the wing backs do is they just give him that little bit of extra service, because perhaps what someone like Iwobi or Mkhitaryan lacks in maybe creativity that you have with a Mesut Ozil, Kolasinac kind of brings that up a little bit, and Bellerin, when you've got both of them kind of flying towards the touchline all the time. So yeah, like Iwobi and Mkhitaryan do that kind of really hard work kind of side, and they force turnovers. They probably haven't got the through ball that Mesut Ozil has. They're probably not quite that creative, but just having those wing backs, you know, putting those cutbacks in for him all the time, it's meat and drink. And so the whole thing was structured around him and around getting the best out of him. And then when we switch formation, you know, at half time, yeah, he's not quite playing out on the wing, so he's running the channel, which we know he can do. But he's also got Lacazette running the other channel, his mate, and they had a really, really good understanding about how to do that. And as for the goal, you know, we're waxing lyrical over the performance, and rightly so, because we're still on quite a high. Like I said, I thought at 2-1, I thought the game was slipping away from us.
It needed something special. Yep.
Yeah, but I mean, before that, between Tottenham's equaliser and Arsenal's equaliser to make it 2-2, I thought we looked in trouble. I thought Tottenham were controlling the game, and albeit Tottenham didn't create a lot, but I felt like they were dictating the tempo. They looked quite happy. The beginning of the second half, I really started to worry. I thought, they look like they've settled into this. And, you know, when you watch the game back, that Aubameyang goal really comes out of nothing. We're putting no pressure on them. We're kind of struggling to get the ball. We've dropped off a bit in terms of our pressing. And then, you know, it's a wonderful ball from Bellerin. It's brilliant from Ramsey to kind of really make up that space. But it's one of those goals in a stadium that kind of takes your breath away because you're not expecting it.
Nor was Hugo Lloris.
Well, exactly. You take them early like that, and you know, it's right in the corner anyway, so it's doubtful he would have got there even if he'd have seen it coming. But you know, the earliness with which he takes the strike just it surprises the defender who probably relaxes a bit because he just thinks, oh, he's just going to take a touch here, so I'll just show him outside. If the defender realizes what he's got in his mind to pull the trigger, then he throws himself in front of it and probably makes a block. But it's the surprise element of it, because he hits it straight away. The defender's thinking, right, I'll let him take his touch and then I'll get up his backside. Then I'll shepherd him. He's not expecting this shot. Lloris is not set for it at all. And, you can feel it in a stadium when nobody expects it, when everybody just goes, oh, wow, that's out of nothing. And it was an absolutely superb goal. Just what we needed at that point. And from that point on, we just didn't look back at all.
Yeah.
Can I add?
Please, yeah.
So Tim started with Bellerin, but something we'd seen going on through that game was switching the play to Bellerin, which is actually the first pass on this. I think that's the fourth time he hits that ball to switch it from one side to the other, which totally opens up the play. And I don't know how much he's been doing that in other games, but this happened 4 times before he pinged the ball to Bellerin, and the whole side was wide open. And I think the other thing that was beautiful, to Tim's point, was Lacazette up front, but kind of going quite wide right and making all sorts of things happen from the touch line and playing him behind. It's a whole new way of seeing him, where he's not dropping deep. The 1-2 formation up front. There's a real beauty. I've often wondered if Lacazette could kind of play an Alexis role over on the left. How could we use him if he's not at centre forward? Of course, with 2 forwards, Aubameyang's the guy who's maybe most suited to getting in behind, being the most forward. And here you have Lacazette creating all sorts of stuff by peeling off to the right and making nice curved runs and opening up the whole field of play for us. So those were the 2 things that kind of hit me as Tim was walking us through that goal.
Yeah, and I just think when you watch Aubameyang, the way he covers ground and the way he runs and the way he doesn't just run to a point, but the way he gets there so that he pulls defenders out of position or creates an extra little yard of space. I mean, he's so intelligent with it, and he can make up the ground so fast. I thought he was very good against Bournemouth, and it was his first time playing center forward in the league in ages, and this is his second game doing it in ages. Really, his first start was Bournemouth since the Chelsea game. So,
yeah, he was the press too. The first 20 minutes,
he had the most tackles in the team. I mean,
it was all Aubameyang. I mean, it was plenty of other people, but it was Aubameyang. I mean, he fucking tore it up.
He did. And I think so, Clive, let me just, before we hit the break, let me just ask you, I mean, I'm not saying you haven't liked Aubameyang. You've always liked Aubameyang. You've liked Lacazette too, and they're very different players. I'm curious to get your feeling on the evolution of this position and, Aubameyang is center forward, and whether or not your thoughts about him in that role are evolving, and certainly within the context of the performance he put in this day. And, whether he should stay in that position potentially.
Well, when we spoke about him before, he was playing left, right? So he's playing more of a centre forward now. I think what I tend to do is not tie my scarf to any particular player, because no player is going to sustain a level of form throughout the season. And at various points in the season, emotionally, you need different things, different times, different structures versus different teams. Fair enough, I think versus some of the better teams, I think Aubameyang at centre forward really works, because I think we're more likely to get broken field play. We're more likely to see him. The touches doesn't really matter. It's more about what you do with those touches. And I think, I picked the team before the game, and I picked him to start centre forward. And I picked him to do exactly the same as Bournemouth, and it worked really well. And having the substitute from the bench allows us more firepower. And yeah, more importantly, I think he's getting fitter. I think he's looking stronger. I think he's looking sharper. And when you feel fit, I think you have better pictures on your finishes. And that goal, I just didn't see it coming. Just did not see that finish coming. When it went past Lloris's left hand, which is his strong hand, you're thinking he's waved that, must be going past the post. And when he went in, it's sort of like a bit of a shock. And you're thinking, how has that beat him? But it's the timing of the shot. And that just says pure confidence. And
it was a giant tap in.
Yeah, pure confidence. But again, we're talking about Tim talking about the defender coming back. Well, Aurier is an attacking right back, and we've now got him running backwards, doing things he doesn't want to do, which is what we forced in this game. There was a period 5-10 minutes after half time where I felt a little bit concerned, and it was slowed down to their level, and we slowly got out of it, and that chance was sort of coming, but I didn't expect that goal. And from that moment on, we absolutely smashed them to bits. But yeah, I think, again, I did not buy the Spurs hype train. I really didn't, and I predicted we'd win. I thought we'd win well. I don't rate their players. I really don't, but you've got to get them into places where they're not rated, and I think that's what Emery did. He forced his team into uncomfortable places, and we saw their quality and lack of. And when Spurs are under pressure, much like the game at Stamford Bridge, when they're under pressure, they start to fight and foul and become quite undisciplined, and that's where we forced them, and that's why we won the game, jogging away.
Yeah, and it sucks that we drew them in the Carabao Cup, because the last thing we need in December is another fixture of this intensity, and that's going to be a really tricky one for Emery. Can he swallow his pride and maybe approach that with any less than the intensity that he did this match? That's a tough one. I think we should do this. I think we should take a break. We'll learn about lingerie, which is an important topic and one that is near and dear to my heart. And certainly if you're ever going to think sexy thoughts after this match would be a perfect time. When we come back, after Scott gets his word in about the statistical analysis of the game, we'll talk about Torreira. We'll talk about Ramsey. We'll talk about some of the incidents in the second half. Kolasinac perhaps as well, and then we'll probably finish up with a little on the Ozil situation in the United game. So still plenty to come. Stay with us. We're going to sell you some lingerie and be back with more after this. Guys, this holiday season, how about giving your wife or girlfriend something totally different? Something romantic that celebrates the unique connection between you and her. I'm talking about a luxury gift service called Enclosed that delivers designer lingerie to your lady month after month. Enclosed is like a flower of the month or beer of the month, but instead of flowers, she gets surprised with ultra high-end lingerie. And this is seriously high-end stuff, the kind of quality that will really impress your lady. Enclosed was designed specifically to help guys find gifts for their wives. Enclosed is all about helping you make her happy. This fosters intimacy and closeness, and as someone who is married with a toddler, I can tell you this kind of thing is so important as a relationship grows over time. And Enclosed is effortless for you. Every month, Enclosed sends your wife or girlfriend a custom curated lingerie gift selected just for your lady, and they back the gift up with a 100% size guarantee so you never have to worry about fit. This is as easy and as satisfying as it gets. You can join more than 30,000 couples that love Enclosed, and I'll give you a little gift. Right now, you can get $35 off your Enclosed gift. Just go to enclosedlingerie.com. That's enclosedlingerie.com. Enter the code ARSENAL. Can't forget that one. Enter the code ARSENAL at checkout and get $35 off any Enclosed gift. Why not give your wife or girlfriend something that really reflects and deepens the connection between the two of you? Something that you would never give your mother. That's enclosedlingerie.com with the code ARSENAL for $35 off, the best gift ever. Do it now. Okay, and now Scott is here to give us the statistical perspective on what was a glorious victory in the North London Derby, but the statistics, I think in this case, are going to back up the sensation that we got watching it, which is always nice when that happens. And so Scott is on Twitter at @O_that_crab. Hello, Scott.
Yeah!
That is Scott's trademark welcoming introduction. If you don't know the backstory to that, if you're new to the podcast, Scott used to give us this sort of humdrum hello, and I didn't really appreciate it. I always gave him shit for it. Then he came up with the yeehaw, and we love it, and it stuck, so that's that. Scott, real quick, let's just go to the general statistics. As far as XG goes, I mean, did the underlying metrics show us winning as comfortably and confidently as we did in the end?
Yeah, it did. So overall, I had this one at 2.87 to 1.14. So outside of the penalties, even there, Arsenal really dominated with over 2 to 0.34. So it was a pretty comprehensive victory. Looking at the shot placement, those showed the same story. So yeah, this was definitely a deserved victory, not like some of those earlier in the season where Arsenal kind of skated by on luck.
Yeah, and I mean, maybe the sort of hidden story here, I mean, yes, we conceded 2 goals, but when you look at the XG numbers, and especially when you strip out the penalty, which probably never should have been a penalty, that's pretty good defensive effort, isn't it?
It is. This has actually been the best defensive effort by XG for Arsenal this season. Looking at Bournemouth and this one put together, that's actually the first and the third best performances of the season. So it's almost like things are starting to round into form, which is a very positive thing to see, especially going to Old Trafford on Wednesday.
Yeah, and it's so hard to evaluate rounding into form when the lineups and the formations change so often, because you sort of feel like you got some footing under you in evaluating the team, and then Emery switches it up again, which maybe that's why the opposition is having so much trouble too. There were some great performances in this game. Really, every player gave so much to the cause, which was great to see. But statistically, some players really stood out. And I saw on Twitter you had particular praise for Aubameyang. His best performance at Arsenal, certainly this season, right?
Yeah, and I think it's definitely his most complete performance from Arsenal. I know one of the things we've talked about several times is that he's a world-class Theo Walcott, where he doesn't always get involved in play and he really focuses on the final ball, either putting it in the net or making the final pass to set someone else up. But in this match, he really was doing a lot more than that. Not to say that he didn't do really well with getting shots and getting key passes, but he also had almost 90% pass completion, led Arsenal in tackles, believe it or not, with 5. He also blocked 3 passes, committed a foul, which to me isn't always a bad thing. To me, it also shows that you're engaged in the play, you're making effort. And I thought that he did well as a trigger of the press, especially in that opening 20 minutes when Arsenal were really on top of Spurs. So I thought that this was probably his best, most complete performance of the season, and probably overall with Arsenal.
Yeah, I mean, it was great to see. I mean, what was his XG personally for the game?
I had him at 1.5 overall for the game.
And that's the kind of thing.
That includes the penalty.
Am I right to say he had 7 shots?
I had 4 shots for him.
4 shots. Okay, that sounds a little more reasonable. But again, with all the other things he did in this game, it's great to see. And then, the 4 shots, the 1.5 XG, he's now scored, 10 consecutive shots on target?
Exactly, yeah. When he puts the ball on frame, he's been finding corners, and yeah, it's been really good for him this season. Yeah, he's leading the Golden Boot race now again, or tied, I think, leading for the Golden Boot race. It's great to see. I mean, I don't think anybody needs to be told what I think of him as a player, but it's great to see him getting the results, both in goal scoring and contributing some of the things to the team performance overall that maybe we didn't think was in his locker. So that's great. Now, obviously, another player that everybody fell in love with, if they weren't already, was Lucas Torreira. A night for him to remember for the rest of his life, scoring his debut goal for Arsenal in the derby, but also just a dominating performance in the center of the pitch. How did he rate for you statistically? Did the underlying metrics pick up on the performance the way it certainly looked watching it? Yeah, I think it definitely did. I know one of the things that's really impressive with Torreira is if you look at his touch map, it is really all over the field. The guy has a knack for being where the ball is and being in the right position. The other thing that I'm always impressed with him is his ability to get ball recoveries. So anytime there's a loose ball, I think this also feeds into his ability to read the game. He is almost always the first one to it, getting that ball in those 50-50s and keeping Arsenal in possession. He also added 3 tackles and 2 interceptions and blocked passes. 3 shots total. He had that one that was deflected and it was just wide of the post. I thought that was going to be his opening goal. But then he actually ended up getting the last one, and that was an absolutely beautiful, well-taken shot. I think Torreira has just been an absolute revelation for the team.
Revelation, but I'll take your
revelation. And he's been, probably the signing of the season for me. And he's been that guy that's been missing from the Arsenal midfield for so long, makes everything tick, just makes everybody else on the pitch better.
The joke when he was signed is someone on Twitter said he's Santi Conte. He's part Cazorla, part Conte, and everybody was kind of laughing about that. But he kind of does look a little bit like that. I mean, that really is the player we seem to have. And I certainly have been impressed with him defensively, maybe even more than I expected to be, but certainly as much as I expected to be, but much more impressed with his all-around game, which has been great to see. One player who I'm just kind of curious to see statistically how his performance looks to you is Kolasinac, because he's a player that I think a lot of people have been worried about, and everybody's been hoping for Nacho Monreal to make it back. But in the back three, he gets to play as a wing back, a position he certainly seems to enjoy more. Definitely seems to emphasize the attacking part of his game, but was switched on a little more defensively. I mean, are there any statistics in his performance today that maybe suggest this is a role that suits him a little more and his performance might be rising to the level of being a longer-term solution?
Yeah, so I mean, I think as long as Arsenal stick with the back three, I think he actually might be the first choice on that left-hand side. I don't think that he would be the first choice if we were going to actually play a back four and needed him in a fullback, because Kolasinac might be one of the best final third players that Arsenal have on the team, which is actually pretty surprising.
Statistically, how would you reference that? Like, what were some of the areas where he excelled?
So one of the things that he does really well is in that wide area and in that half space on the left-hand side, he really does a great job passing the ball. He led Arsenal, or he was second on Arsenal in passes completed into the box. Guendouzi actually led the team with 5, and he had 4. He had 5 key passes on the day. Which
That's a lot.
Yeah, it totally is. And he really does a good job. And these aren't just little key passes where it's a little, 3 or 4 yard pass and then someone else does something else. He is doing a lot of the work with his key passes to set up his teammates. He led Arsenal with 2 completed through balls, both of those into the final third. Hector Bellerin also had 2 through balls, on the day.
Maybe something speaks volumes too about the way we were playing, the way we were set up to play, that both our wing backs had a couple of through balls in the game.
Yeah, we definitely had a lot of joy finding the width there, because our Tottenham were very narrow because they were in kind of a 4-4-2 diamond kind of formation, so they really had spaces to exploit on the wings, and then the wing backs really had a lot of joy down those sides. And then the other thing that was really impressive is he led the team in touches in the box, so that really does show his ability to get involved in the play deep and his ability to stay on the ball and hold on to it. So really this was something that's very impressive. And I think that if you watch him play, when he does make his crosses, one of the things that he does is he looks up, he picks out a pass. He doesn't just, kick it hard and hope. He's really doing a good job of finding his teammates in the final third. So I think that this has really brought out the best in him in this system, and it's something that I'm very impressed with.
Yeah, and look, if it gets us scoring more and gets us creating more power to him, because ultimately this iteration of Arsenal is going to be successful by creating chances and scoring goals more than, sort of stalwart defensive efforts would sort of be my interpretation there. So if he can do that, it becomes a very valuable skill for us. Now, a couple of other statistics that I think are interesting to look at, comparative statistics. First of all, Dele Alli had a night to forget. His second half is particularly hilarious. Do you want to regale everybody with his second half passing statistics?
Yeah, so this has been going around on Twitter, but yeah, so in the second half for Dele Alli, he had 6 passes and 4 of them came from kickoffs. So not the best day for
he
Dele
completed
Alli.
2 passes from open play.
Exactly. So
good job, Dele.
Yep, and yeah, so if all the people that I like to see struggle, Dele Alli is up there with the top, because he's just a snide, really kind of just a punchable face kind of a guy. So
Aaron Ramsey certainly wanted a shot at him, that's for sure. A couple other statistics, and this one may not be in your database, but between Arsenal and Spurs, do you have any data on who has the most completed home stadiums right now?
Yeah, this one, it does show as 1-0.
1-0 to the Arsenal. Yeah,
there
in fact. All right, well, look, it was a hell of a day. It was a hell of a fun day, and a great result in the top 4 battle as well, because this puts us technically on goal difference ahead of Spurs, where we rightfully belong. But maybe, just maybe, it changes the model a little bit. I know a few weeks back we talked about what your model had in terms of our chances at top 4, and I think we're in the 30% range, something like that. Has that changed at all? Have we scooted up with this result?
Yeah, so before the match, I ran a couple different scenarios through, what the win-loss draw all do to it. So a win puts Arsenal in about 47%. So we are looking a lot better there.
Coin toss, yep.
So with the team ratings, both Chelsea and Tottenham rate slightly higher than Arsenal on this. But I think if Arsenal continue to play like they've been playing over the last few weeks, we'll start to see the team rating move up, and in their spot right now, they are totally in it on points. The goal difference looks good, so I think that they are really in a good spot to really challenge for a top 4 spot.
It's Old Trafford on Wednesday. Not a lot of turnaround after a game that I think took a lot of energy. I mean, we won well against Tottenham, but we worked very, very hard. So there may be some tired legs in the squad, and Granit Xhaka will not be able to play, but apparently United are facing an injury crisis of their own in terms of unavailable center backs. Do you have an early prediction in terms of what your model says the most likely outcomes of this are?
Yeah, so the model is actually saying that this is going to be a very even match. So Arsenal do have the edge in the team ratings, but because this one's at Manchester United, they get the home field advantage. So right now I have it at 36.6% for United, 26.3% for a draw, and 37.1% for Arsenal. So very even. I don't have a thing in there for an injury crisis, which I probably should. But I don't think, even if there was an injury crisis, that Jose Mourinho actually trusts any of his center backs right now. So it would be really interesting to what he would choose. But I think the biggest key for Arsenal is going to be attacking Nemanja Matic, another one that I can't say very well. Because to me, watching him play, I think that he is totally washed and is past it. And he is definitely not the player that he was at Chelsea, where he could be a sole holding midfielder to actually shield the back four. Right now, he is basically a sieve that people can just cut right through.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting watching little 5'4", 5'5", whatever he is, 5'3" Torreira running around after Pogba and Matic. Certainly in terms of physicality, they may have an edge if they have players like Fellaini and Matic and Pogba on the pitch facing potentially Guendouzi and Torreira. But in terms of technical quality and skill, I mean, I agree with you. I think Matic is totally washed. So, that's a big one for us. I mean, one thing that I'd like to cover just before we say goodbye then is, I've been on Twitter giving it pretty large that I think we can win this game. And my reason for thinking we can win this game is, first of all, I dismiss the history at Old Trafford. I mean, the players don't play history. They play the team in front of them. And I don't think this United team is very good. But the other reason is, they're really, really bad defensively. For people who are wondering what I mean, can you kind of give us a little bit of the data that backs up just how bad they are defensively? Because, you look at our goal scoring form and you look at the talent we have in attack, which is really our strength, and the way we can play in the transition. And, players like Aubameyang, whose movement is so slick and whose finishing is so on point right now. I mean, United aren't just mediocre defensively. They're downright bad, aren't they?
They are, and so you don't even really need to look at anything advanced to kind of get an idea. This can be really basic data. So going back to when Jose Mourinho took over, his first season, United allowed 11.5 shots per game. The second season, the first season it was 9.5 shots per game. The second season it was 11.5 shots per game, and they took a lot of De Gea amazing shot stopping to be able to actually stay with the second best defense. This season, they're all the way up to 14.6 shots per game, Jesus, which is the fourth most in the league.
Holy cow!
Yeah, they're up there with teams like Fulham and Huddersfield, and those are not really the kind of things that you expect from a team with the name Manchester United. And they're allowing the sixth most goals this season. So even though they are overperforming their XG, they are still
in the bottom
a lot
third.
Of goals.
Yeah,
exactly.
So they give up a ton of shots. Those shots turn into a ton of goals, and they give up good shots too.
Exactly, and De Gea is still played really well, and even that, he hasn't been, he doesn't have enough magic to make this turd sandwich into something palatable.
Well said, and a good way to finish. Gives us an optimistic way to look forward to Wednesday, a fun look back on the Derby victory that was, and we will definitely talk to you after the 3 points, which I am confident we will get at Old Trafford on Wednesday. So until then, you can find Scott on Twitter at O_that_crab. Scott, as always, thank you so much.
Thank you. I can't wait to bathe in Jose Mourinho's tears after we beat them 5-0.
Yeah, and hopefully then after they lose, he somehow signs like a 10-year contract extension. We'll see. In any event, we're going to take a short break. We'll come back with more from the crew that has no statistics to support their opinions right after this. Stay with us. Okay, we're back, and now it is time to get into the littlest big man on the pitch, or the biggest little man on the pitch, and that is Lucas Torreira. And for me, he was our man of the match. He scored the goal to make the game safe. He broke up everything that Spurs tried to do. He had chances to score other goals, was maybe a little unlucky not to. But this was a real show of leadership and quality, not just tigerish determination, but real skill and technical ability. I was so impressed with this performance. And Tim, I just want to get your thoughts on Torreira being the signing of the season, the most influential player to come to any team in the Premier League potentially. You might have said Jorginho ahead of this, maybe would have been up for that. For me, it is Torreira. We haven't lost since he's come into the team. He's solidified some of our problems at the back, but he's added a lot more progressiveness than I expected, and I thought he showed class at both ends of the pitch in this game.
Yeah, absolutely. I think everything we'd read, because there wasn't obviously not a lot known about this player prior to us signing him, but everything we'd read was, I've said this and written about this before. If you've been lacking like a really quality kind of defensive screening midfielder or destroyer for as long as Arsenal have, then the words Uruguayan defensive midfielder really jump off the page at you.
Yeah.
And in that respect, he's kind of he's been everything you expect, and in many ways, Uruguayan players are the easiest to predict. They really, the way they do youth production, they're the national team take responsibility for it because the club game just isn't there, which is why they're all quite similar, because the good ones are all basically their developments taken care of by the national team, which creates like a real unity. So when you sign a Uruguayan who's been in the junior national teams, you kind of know what you're going to get. It's a bit of a factory, but I think you're right. I think and everything we'd read kind of said he's quite handy on the ball and he can pass, but he could. It's not just he can pass well for a shit kicking defensive midfielder. He can really pass. He can really progress the play. He can play. He's got quick feet, and you saw with that run and that finish. The run is excellent. It's actually it's not quite as easy as it looks. Like he catches Dyer off guard. It's a lovely spin and run forward. And then the finish is just, I loved it because I really thought, because I was at that side of the pitch, and what every Arsenal player does in that scenario, and I understand it, is they go for the pullback, but how many times have you seen the pullback's a bit too hard, and the striker has to take a touch and get it out of his feet, and it gets blocked or it goes over or something. Like this was one time I saw him running through, and I just thought, no, plant it. Put it in the corner, like you've got the angle. Don't mess about like trying to square it to Lacazette. And it was an absolutely fantastic goal and
a good ball from Aubameyang, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's not a quality Aubameyang's usually renowned for either. His kind of
a left-footed through ball too.
Yep.
Yeah. You'd expect that to be the other way around. Torreira kind of sliding Aubameyang through there. But it just, I think it also showed you the momentum and the confidence we had at that point. It's a really fitting first goal for him. I'm really, it doesn't matter ultimately, but I'm really glad his first goal for Arsenal was one like this, and not some I don't know, like fifth goal in a 5-0 home win against Burnley or something.
Look what it really meant to him too. I mean,
yeah,
he was gonna cry.
Absolutely, and it really put the cap on his performance, which I thought was excellent. I think him and Xhaka have been a really good partnership all season, and I thought Xhaka was good. I thought he was a bit of a leader out there, but Torreira just he's just taken that part of the pitch to another level. And our midfield's by no means perfect, but I think you're right. I struggle to think of a signing at any club this season that's been that good, and I struggle to think of a team that Torreira wouldn't get into, which may prove to be a worry.
Fair point.
A little bit down the line, but
you bite your tongue.
Let's not worry about that at the moment, because he looks he looks like how like Kante at the moment is kind of struggling a little bit because he's being asked to do a slightly more technical role, and he is quite good technically and he uses the ball well, but it's still not quite doesn't really suit his qualities. But with Torreira, it's just he's just the full package. He really is. I struggle to think of a weakness in his game, and I just I love that video clip that emerges of him like with Ali and Ericsson, and Torreira's like, on the floor for most of it, and they still can't get the ball off him. And Ali, because he's a snide little cunt, gives him a little nudge when he's on the floor, little knee in the back of the neck that the referee can't see, and he just like it's almost like he doesn't even notice that people are trying to kick him. He just
probably got it all the way up through youth football as they kick the crap out of each other all over Uruguay.
Absolutely, yeah, and
just come out with the ball. And he does it every time. He reminds me a bit of Arteta and a lot of Cazorla when he goes into those things. He always comes out with the fucking ball.
Yeah,
he's got a really low center of gravity that's very underrated.
Yeah, you know what it is too? You made a good point about not seeing much of him beforehand, Tim. And I'll admit, the most I'd ever seen of him was for Uruguay this past summer at the World Cup. And they had like 20% possession in that World Cup. He played very deep. And I swear to you, if you looked at his stats, I bet his biggest passing total in any of those games was 10 passes. So you just didn't get a real picture of what he could do. And much like the Coughlin-Xhaka partnership when we went to a back three under Wenger, in the back three, both of those guys play a little more advanced, but Torreira is getting into advanced positions he wasn't getting into the 4-2-3-1. And so in the Bournemouth game, he had a couple of chances that just flashed by the post. He had an earlier one in this game that took a nick and just went by the upper corner. It was a really exceptional performance at both ends of the pitch, but the back three, I think, gives him a little more of a platform to get more forward. He's almost like a defensive Ozil. And what I mean by that is, one thing that Ozil has about his game is he always knows where everything is at the pitch and seems to be able to anticipate it in ways other people can't. Torreira does that defensively. He never seems to be like two-footing anyone or flying in the way Coughlin was. He just always seems to be one step ahead of where the ball's about to be. And he has tremendous anticipation. I mean, Clive, his partnership with Xhaka is excellent. Have you noticed, and did you notice in this game, maybe a slightly different role for him with the back three that allowed him to pick and choose his points to get further up the pitch and maybe be more influential than just being a retriever of the ball?
I think Xhaka's been a slight change rather than Torreira. I think Xhaka's been on that booking to get him suspended for a couple of games now, and I think he's been a little bit more passive and he's stayed a little bit deeper.
Well, now he misses the easy United game and he's back for the big Huddersfield match at the weekend, though, so that's good.
So he just needs to get through this one more game. He was similar at Bournemouth. He was quite passive at Bournemouth, and I think he was a little bit passive here. Still very, very good. Still very controlling. Still positionally really, really good. Just not quite as all action, getting himself into areas where you have to make big fouls. He ended up making one and see you later, misses Old Trafford. So I think Torreira's picked up some of that slack. I think historically in his career, he used to be a right winger, would you believe? And you don't often see right wingers ended up being defensive midfielders. I think that's an unusual transition positionally wise, and you sometimes see right backs going in there or centre halves going in there, but you don't see right wingers going in there. So when he receives that ball on the right hand side, he just spins around the corner. That position, the muscle memory is already there, right? Right winger, that cross shot is what it's bread and butter for you. So he's in that situation and he slots it. So yeah, it's been the biggest change apart from the manager and his coaching and the fact that we are running much more intense. The biggest change has been our centre midfield too. We dominate the area of the pitch in all facets, and we have done since this guy's come in. And we've not just found one player, we've found two players, and the team is rocking around them really, really nicely. And we're starting to concede, less chances. I know we gave away a couple set piece goals here yesterday, but we're starting to see less of those one-on-ones going in behind us because our intensity is up the pitch is much higher. So, I'm really happy with the centre midfield too. And it'll be interesting to see what he does against Manchester United, how he's going to replace Xhaka. And I'm not sure what you guys think, but I think he may go Guendouzi, but other people may say he may go Ramsey. That would be an interesting decision when he comes to it.
Well, let's talk about Ramsey then. I mean, and I'll stay with you just for a second, Clive. I mean, here's a player. It's funny because I think we all got it right on the last podcast, more or less, except Paul, who wasn't on it. So in a sense, he got it right too. I think I said, this is too good a player to just be frozen out because of a contract situation. We need to make the most of him. And you guys said, he's not frozen out. He still has a role to play, and that role can be very important. And I think we were both proven right because he is very talented, and he did get a role, and he did make a huge difference. So, Clive, I mean, I'm curious also if you think for him to be one of the first into the fight, right? The Eric Dyer fight. to show, and I don't know if that's performance or if that's real. I have to believe it's real, to show that we like to overanalyze these contract situations. And 2 days ago, everyone's saying, "Oh, get him out of the fucking club. If he doesn't want to be here, blah, blah, blah," like we always are because we're all crazy lunatics. But he's right in there defending his teammates, standing up for the badge. And then he comes on at halftime and puts in a massive effort that's hugely influential in the outcome. I mean, how impressed were you with the commitment and the quality that he showed, for a player who maybe we've been wondering, how much is left in his Arsenal tank?
I was really impressed, right? And I think I'm a big team player, right? Team man. And when I see players
podcast aside, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, when I see players playing like individuals, I don't like it. I like to see the team structure. And Ramsey, Tottenham made a mistake. Eric Dyer made a mistake. He got him mad, right? And because I actually think recently he's been a little bit sulky, not massively, just doing what he needs to do. But in this game, he was on full power, and I don't know what happened, but he was ready to go. And both, on both the assists. I know the assists sort of almost took care of themselves, but it was quite interesting. They were both done off one touch, really quickly, really direct, broken field, bang, in you go. Work on that, and I think that's exactly what was required for him. So he played the role as perfectly as you could do for 45 minutes. You just could not deny it. He disrupted them. His movement was everywhere. He did some things that were not very pretty, but you know what? The intent to get in those positions to benefit the rest of the team, you could feel it was just different. It was just powerful. It was driving them back. He overrun a couple. Then he tried a couple of things. And you just didn't, on the day, I just didn't care because he was just driving them to distraction.
He was everywhere too. Everywhere.
And I sometimes think as fans, we focus too much on the execution. We should focus on the intent a lot more. Similar to Mkhitaryan at Bournemouth, his intent in the second half was really, really good. His execution was poor, but he was really trying to unsettle them. And I think, again, we focus a lot on that final part. I know it's important, and when it doesn't happen in a critical moment, we'll all refer to it. But if you look at the intention to play first, that's what I was looking at. And I saw a player that was playing for the team. Even when he had his bib on, he was playing for the team, and I thought that was brilliant. There was even a bit in that kerfuffle when El Neni, who I don't think was in the squad, I think he was just somebody sitting behind the bench. Even he was down in the corner.
Wasn't that Guendouzi?
What does that tell you?
He ran 50 yards to choke somebody. It was Dele Alli.
I'm not sure if he's in the squad. I'm sure someone will look. But he was in the corner. He was in the squad, was he? Okay. Yeah. He was in the corner, and I'm thinking, well, mate, you got no chance of coming on. What are you doing? But he was like right in there. It was just, the whole thing screamed collective. And for me, that is when people talk about Arsenal coming back, when my sort of peak going time, we do that. We used to do that all the time. What we did there, that's what we used to do when we used to go to Old Trafford. When we went there, we used to go there mob-handed, and we used to say, right, we're here, and you're not getting out of here, right? And we'd take them on, and that's exactly what we did. And by taking them on in that way, we took away their main strength. And I could not be happier as a fan. Honestly, I've just been buzzing ever since.
Yeah.
I think I broke my Twitter record yesterday. I'm sitting about 4,000. So I apologize to all the podcast listeners for flooding their timelines right now.
Yeah, everybody was euphoric after it. And I think there were so many great little pictures and images from the game of dejected Spurs players on the ground with Arsenal players hovering over them, the most iconic being that Socrates one where he's over Harry Kane with his arms apart. And I had said to Tim on Twitter, someone needs to Photoshop this to where Cristo Redentor is in Brazil. And of course, it was done, and you can find it on my Twitter timeline. It's fantastic. Every bit as great as I hoped it would be. Paul, let me just ask you a really quick question here that isn't germane to this game per se, but is this really sort of the problem and the reason why it's good that fans don't run a club? Because 2 days ago, there were people saying, get Ramsey out of the club as quickly as you can, do whatever you can to get rid of him. I'm glad we didn't give him a contract. Thank God we dodged a bullet. And today there's just people all over Twitter saying, give Mesut Ozil's money to Aaron Ramsey and sign him up, and you should have given him a contract on the pitch at full time. We're such short-termist in our thinking, but as inspired as his performance was, as much quality as it had and passion as it had, if the decision is, Aaron Ramsey's going to want a couple 100,000 a week. And that can't be a situational player. That can't be a rotational player. We already have a potential albatross around our neck with Ozil, who we'll get to in a moment, in a very similar type of situation. So as great as it was to see him have this hurrah, have this performance, have this passion for the club in the derby, you can't be basing the strategy of your club personnel-wise on a 45-minute performance and one fight by the corner flag over players that are this significant, right?
Yeah, exactly right. And it was a very particular way of playing that suits Ramsey. And as Tim said, I agree with Tim's point, which was we were actually just about in the game for the first 5 or 10 minutes. I mean, I went out and mapped what our attacking actions were. And before the goal, we basically had one run down the right and one run down the left in the 11 minutes after the start of the second half, where we should have been coming out all charged up. So we shouldn't. This was not a perfect performance by us. The good news is, and maybe that's always typical of a derby, and a derby with lots of scraps in it and back and forward and so many changes. But we can play a lot better than this. A lot cleaner, a lot more clinical. Ramsey was absolutely key to the second half, but this was a setup that suited him, and we can't always play like that. But whatever we say about Ramsey in this game, the same, we shouldn't then go on and make the same mistake about Ozil, because right now we've written Ozil off today, and he'll be of no use to us, and he's shit. Except sometimes he's brilliant when things are set up for him.
I think it's a slightly different situation, though, and we can come to why that is in a moment.
It is. But there's a part of it that it isn't. And the same is true of Aubameyang. He was a guy who can't do anything but score. But when you put him in the right setup, suddenly the guy is actually doing everything, including scoring. And so I do think there's the concern, to your point, that one can get carried away on the Ramsey thing.
I think you're begging the question a little, but I'll explain my position in a moment. Yeah, go on.
All right. So here's my true answer to what you're saying. I think Emery said he had a plan for Ramsey. I think this was it. He tried this plan in the first 2 games of the season, but he tried it with Ozil on the pitch. I think we all concluded you can't have both. But if you get it right, this is how you use Ramsey as that pressing agent, that pressing trigger in the middle of the pitch, ideally with Aubameyang and Lacazette either side, so that when he forces a turnover. Now, can you do this for 90 minutes every game? No. But you get it right. You point him in, you apply him at the right time. This is how you use Ramsey.
Sure. And here's all I would say with that. If your decision is not to re-sign Ramsey, the decision should be based on the following things. We can't give £200,000 a week to a guy who has a history of injury absences, doesn't fit the system as closely as we'd like. We really want to get Nelson into the rotation next season. We probably need to go out and buy another wide player, which means Ramsey's playing time maybe even further limited. And we like the player, but we don't see him as a foundational cornerstone. And because we don't see him that way, that wage can't be given to him. It's not that he's crap.
I fully endorse this view.
Okay, so and again, that's tough. And I said this on Twitter. Good football clubs, and Tim, you've banged on about this a lot too. Good clubs do this. Good clubs make these hard choices, make the choices not to give contracts to popular players because for one reason or another, it's not a fit. Now, they usually sell the player and make money off of him. Right?
The mistake is we haven't sold.
Well, right. But you don't compound the mistake by then paying him money that hamstrings your wage bill further and pushes you up against FFP. Clive, I can tell you're begging to jump back in. So before I go to Tim, why don't you get in here?
No, you're making great points, right? It's just we're turning a new page. This club is. We can't turn a new page if you sign all the old players on double the money, right? So it's just we're not going to change our face, right? Spurs, we knew all their faces they were turning up with. They've not made any changes, not made any signings. We had something new to show them, and next year we're going to have more new things to show other people. We have to embrace renewal, and this guy's given us 10 great years. It's the club's fault we haven't got money back, and it's maybe Ramsey's agent's fault they didn't sign the contract soon enough and allowed other players to develop close to Ramsey's potential right in front of his eyes, which made the club change their strategy. And I think that's a real shame. It's a real shame that he's going to probably end his career that way at Arsenal. But while he's going out, he's shutting the door really hard behind him, and that was a really good performance at the weekend. And not even I can deny that.
Yeah, and look, and Emery did make some comments today in a press conference, I believe, that sort of hinted towards, look, Ramsey has one eye on his future, but he still has one eye on his present, and he's balancing that professionally, and we appreciate him for it, essentially. And I think it's just a reminder that, this is not going to change. And Tim, I'll give you a shot at this. I mean, bringing it back to the game, how impressed were you with this performance? And do you think that Aaron Ramsey is going to be a bittersweet departure, that this is a player who has a lot of really nice history at the club that we are going to miss when he's gone?
Yeah, of course it will be, and there's no need to bring it up again. I guess the fact it's going to be on a free is particularly galling, but not towards the actual sentiment towards the player himself. That's more at the club and their handling of the situation. But yeah, absolutely, and more so because this is the final year of his contract, and he knows it. He absolutely knows now that he's going on a Bosman, and he's still, he got kind of, I don't want to say sent to the Ukraine, but he was playing in that game in the Ukraine. It would have been easy for him, I think, and I'm not saying he'd have been right to think this, but a lot of footballers, and there's probably one in our squad who wears the number 10 shirt at the moment, would have been thinking, fuck off, I'm not going to Kiev, or if I am, then I'm just going to sulk, and I'm going to play wall passes, and I'm going to sit and I'm going to wait for my fat contract, and I'm not going to put it in training. But Ramsey's not like that. He's never been like that. He's super super professional. I think
Tim,
like that.
When I look at him, mate, I think he really wants to stay.
Yeah,
and that's a player that does not want to go. You don't do that on the sidelines because you're giving it big time, Charlie. You do that because you really, really care about the club. And when I say this about the agent, I really mean it. That agent has overplayed his hand. And I think if Ramsey ever wanted to stay, he'd have to lose the agent and renegotiate, because that's the person that's blown it for him. He's got a young family, just had twins. You can imagine he was not looking to go anywhere. No way. This is a life decision, right? And he just overplayed his hand with the club regime change. He's ended up in a situation where I actually think he's quite gutted. This manager would have suited him. He's probably thinking, I wish he'd come along 2 years ago for me. He could have helped my career. And we're in a situation now where we're watching someone go out the door. And I'm not his biggest fan, but I can see the player. I can see the emotions around this player. And you can't deny it when he plays well. You can't take your eyes off him. And I'm telling you, I will be kicking his agent right in his head and getting rid of him and making sure that I got looked after. But that's his mistake, and I think it's really quite disappointing. Sorry, mate.
And and you can see the way his agent behaves on Twitter, and you think that's I know a lot of agents have to be slightly gobshitey, for want of a better word, but you kind of, it comes across as a bit of a cowboy, to be honest.
He's an idiot. He should be looking after Aaron Ramsey. He should be looking after J. Manuel Thomas. Do you know what I mean? Not Aaron Ramsey.
And by the way, I hate to bring this stuff back to American sport, but there is an analog to this with a guy named Le'Veon Bell in the NFL who held out, which basically means, he went on strike this entire football season, where he was due to make over $10 million this season, made none of it, zero, because he wanted a new contract. And as a result, his marketability has taken a hit. He lost $10 million, and he's probably not going to get the contract next season that he thought he was going to get. And this was all perpetrated by his agent. So, I mean, these players are vulnerable to bad advice. And, I think Aaron Ramsey, probably the timing of everything, right? New coach who wasn't as committed to him as the old one. Mesut Ozil just sort of showed the player power can get you a huge contract. And his agent probably thought this will be a layup. We've got Dick Law and Ivan Gazidis who love handing out money like candy, no big deal, and then things changed for him. Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, and I think you can see that. I think Clive's right. That's kind of out of step with Ramsey himself. Excuse me. So during the summer, you didn't see a lot of kind of, this club are in for him, this club are in for him, Chelsea want him, United want him. It was a little bit quiet. So I think you're right. I think his preference would have been to stay, but obviously to get a really good contract out of it, and that doesn't look like at this stage that's quite going to happen. But you could say, and I don't mean this with any degree of cynicism, he's the one who will get. He'll get a good contract if he keeps going like this, because he'll become much more marketable. And I don't think that's why he's doing it. I just think this is the way he is. But he'll be much more attractive to other clubs, and they'll look at him and think, "Wow, that's like a really serious professional. He's still doing a really good job. He's still, shop windowing himself." And I think my kind of final thought on it is maybe. I'm starting to only just slightly rethink, this kind of idea that, we need these two wide forwards who play in the half spaces behind the striker, because that's how Emery plays. And I think largely he does. But what we saw on Sunday, and we have seen it a few times this season, is that he's got a very horses for courses kind of approach, different plans for different teams. And that doesn't always mean that he needs Iwobi and Mkhitaryan behind a striker. He changed things in that second half. And that's not to say that the way we played in the second half against Spurs is the way we're going to play all the time. What we're seeing is that Emery is very prepared to do different things for different games. And that to me still doesn't mean that Ramsey's going to get in the team every week. He's not. But what it shows is that he's incredibly useful in certain situations. And he was really, really useful in this situation, because who else in Arsenal? We talk about him, and I've talked about him not really fitting anymore. But I mean, I look at the job he did in that second half, and I can't think of anyone in the league, let alone in our squad, who'd have done it quite as well.
And, by the way, that performance will have given Emery more confidence in being able to pick him and call on him and use him in key situations going forward. And, look, this is the reality. I can be sad that he's off, but believe that the club has ultimately made the right choice in not handing him a big contract. Those two things are not incompatible. You can feel a great affinity to a player, but recognize that player moving on may be part of a process that's important for the club. So we can get off of that topic. I was just really impressed with the performance and the commitment. I mean, he is a professional. He should put in that commitment, but he did. He was hugely valuable in terms of us getting the result. Paul, let's do some quick hits just real quick before we get to the Ozil situation and say goodbye. I thought Kolasinac had his best performance as an Arsenal player. I still thought it was uneven. A lot of people thought it was spectacular. I had some issues with it just because I always have some issues. I just generally have issues. I am laden with issues.
I saw you having issues with him on Twitter, yes?
No, I did not. What? I don't believe I said a thing about Kolasinac in this game. Anyway.
Or maybe it was the WhatsApp. Okay.
It was the WhatsApp. Thanks for outing me. But no, overall, though, he just looks so much more comfortable in the back three, playing as a fullback, a wing back, I should say. I mean, do you think that this was his strongest performance? Does this maybe give you a little pause to reconsider whether he could be even picked ahead of Nacho Monreal if we stay in a back three?
In a back three, yeah. He certainly makes a case. Now, to be fair, he's having a run of fitness, which he hasn't had for a while. And we're giving him, at least lately, the freedom to play to his stronger game. I don't get why a wing-back can't defend, because, a wing-back is not a wing. And we sometimes say, well, he's not a very good full-back because he's a wing-back. But that shouldn't be. It may be, but it shouldn't be. I think that's where coaching comes in, and we have apparently some very good coaches. Can't we just teach him to full back too, and then he'll be really good at various parts of the games? So my hope for him, I thought he was really good in this. I didn't think he was perfect. I didn't think he was spectacular is too strong, but he was a force of nature going forward, and he was pretty decent defending. So that's my Kolasinac take.
Yeah, no, I got another quick hit for you.
The fuck out of him and make him a good fullback.
Yeah, I don't see that happening. I don't think he has the defensive instincts or quality for it, but I certainly think he can work in a back three. Look, let's one more quick hit for you, and then I've got a mentality question for you, Clive. Guendouzi, how much do you love Matteo Guendouzi?
Not as much as you. No, he's great. Yeah. Look, we came out of
I just want to cradle him in my arms and bring him with me places. Yeah, and one of those baby carriers, where you put them on your chest and the legs come out. Anyway, yeah, keep going.
Yeah, well, you could buy him some of those underwear.
At Enclosed Lingerie, I believe they have that, yeah.
Yeah, on a kind of send them it monthly and stuff. I did actually get a question recently. I think people confused me with some kind of help desk for the underwear thing, which
don't do it.
And they asked if any of the ladies' underwear were actually edible. And I explained all ladies' underwear are edible.
Technically, everything is edible if you're willing to put up with the side effects. But yeah, go on about Guendouzi.
Sorry. Oh, yeah. So, yeah, no, I thought he was really good. He obviously came on with a level of energy and application on this. He kind of took the game away from them. We were combining that with a switch to the back four. It was your wet dream of a substitution. Mustafi off, Guendouzi on. I'm like, Elliot just came, didn't he?
Yeah, the problem is I didn't have anything left after the Aubameyang goal.
Yeah, true.
It was in my refractory period. It gets longer as you get older.
I think he took this game away, and that goes along with the idea that Emery comes out of this with 3 or 4 formations that maybe he can toggle between depending on game state, tactical changes of the other guy. He's got 2-3 at the back formations now. He's got a back 4 with a 4-2-3-1, and he's got this 4-3-3 kind of thing, and then with a Ramsey twist up front, that with 3 in midfield. I mean, when you look at the Torreira goal as well, it's Ramsey drops back beside Xhaka, and they become the pivots, and magically at the same time, Torreira just happened to be drifting forward. So lots of options coming out of this game. And one final point on that, you heard Gary Neville talk and others saying this was the best Premier League game they'd seen all season. And you saw the Liverpool game and people saying this is the best Premier League game we've seen all season. We've probably played 2 of the best handful of games. Man, we're fun to watch.
Yeah, we can be. I mean, and the funny thing is, I will say that I'm not sure we've been so fun to watch when we were on Project 24 and we were ripping off wins against lesser teams. But I love the way Emery prepares us for big games. Even the losses to City and Chelsea had really exciting things in them that really encouraged me. So, it is fun to go into big games and feel like we really have a fighting chance again. And Clive, that's where I wanted to ask you about mentality. It is painful for me to admit this, but the last couple of seasons, I felt like Spurs have almost had a swagger against us. Like they knew they could get the ball off us, create transitional chances that would be easy to play against. And I think they sort of looked forward to it. Now, that doesn't mean they always got results or even played well, but I think we were almost more nervous than they were in some of those games. And I think there was a big sort of sea change in this game. You could see it. Vertonghen getting himself sent off, Harry Kane pouting on the pitch, Eriksen losing it with Xhaka going over a little more easily than he liked. The fight, where they didn't necessarily want any piece of Kolasinac, for example, when he came running in. I thought that we regained some of the psychological superiority here, that by the end of the match, they were imploding. They were diving into nasty challenges and complaining to the ref and getting mad at us for the theatrics. And it just sort of seemed like maybe a little bit of their belief in themselves and their superiority had waned here. I mean, do you think I'm reading too much into this, or do you think that this may have been, for the players at Arsenal and the players at Spurs, maybe an important turning of the tide back towards what we considered normal service just a few short seasons ago?
I think this is a significant day. I really do. We were beaten them by 2 goals last year, but I felt we stole the game from them. I felt we snuck up on them, and I felt we scored 2 quick goals, and we just laughed at them. And they when we went to Wembley, they sort of beat us. No, we could have got a goal in the last minute to equalise, but I felt they were better than us, and I felt they've been more consistent than us, especially away from home in the last couple of years. But this game felt different to me because of the way it went, the way it toed and froed. And I think we actually showed them that we were better than them. I think, I said it before, we took their strengths away. We are now not giving them targets. So we're now not giving them weakness. We are now competing with them. And I know I sound boring, Elliot, but being competitive is one of the key fundamentals in football. You have to be competitive. You can't show any weakness. You can't have people not running back. You can't have people not tying up to their men. You can't have people holding on to the ball too long. You've got to be direct. You've got to make people defend. You've got to hurt people. You've got to move them around. And when you do that, you find their weaknesses and then you see their quality. And people get seduced by players' quality based on what they do in good times. And what you need to do, you need to look at what you do in adversity. And when it was 2-1, and that ball went into the net, and you see Torreira pick it out of the net and say, right, let's have it. Let's put it back on. We're not done yet. And that's what we've lacked. We've lacked that spine. We've lacked that belief. And it's coming from some of the new people that are in the club, from the new coaches, from the new players. And the players that were there last year are massively bought in. And I think we surprised them, and I thought we would. We surprised them with our ferocity. We surprised them with our mentality. We surprised them with our execution. And I think, okay, you don't want to say it's a definitive day, because now we're going to play a mixed team potentially on the 19th, and they need that trophy more than we do. And it's going to be very interesting to see how both teams approach it. But for me, Bournemouth, Liverpool, Tottenham, 3 massive games, really good performances. The belief is right up there. And now we've got Manchester United, a place where we have got belief issues. If there's any team that can do it, it's this team at this time that can go there and put in a performance. You can't guarantee the result, but we have gone to Manchester United and we have barely performed over the last few years. Let's go there and make sure we do that this time.
Yeah, and by the way, I thought this was a brilliant day for Emery, who has really come into his own now between the Bournemouth game, the Liverpool game, the way he's, he managed the trip to Ukraine with real pragmatism, and I think he feels very much in control. The way he was trying to excite the Emirates crowd at various points of the game, telling them to get up, keep cheering. He's involved every minute of the game. That doesn't necessarily mean the involvements are effective. I mean, just because a coach is up off his chair doesn't mean he's doing good things, but you can really see the extent to which he's helping the players through the game with little adjustments. And ultimately, it really feels like Emery's team right now, and you really see his blueprint, his imprint on it. I have said in the past that halftime changes are often an indication that you got it wrong from the start. I don't think that was the case in this day. I think you got it right from the start and then got it right again at halftime, which was great to see. He just feels like he has a real command over the weapons in his arsenal, so to speak. So, Tim, now I have to give you the pleasure of talking about Mesut Ozil. And before we go, we have to talk about this. I mean, look, and for anyone who's saying, oh, come on, we just won the derby, let's talk about that, let's stay focused on that, I couldn't agree with you more. But look, he is the highest paid player at our club by miles. He is the most popular player at our club by miles. This is a player who is just a massive, massive part of the club and potentially the future of the club based on what we're paying him. And by the way, Paul's got to run. Paul, if you're still there, you want to say goodbye?
Bye.
Bye, Paul.
Have
Paul's
fun.
on Twitter at Positive
Bye.
My Pants. And we will be wrapping up momentarily. So, for those of you who are thinking of going, don't go. We're talking about Mesut Ozil. This is what gets the clicks, after all. So, Tim, I mean, first of all, let me ask it to you this way. There are 2 possibilities. One is he genuinely has back spasms. He was out because he has back spasms. Now, we can address why we believe or don't believe in that. But let's just say for a minute that is a totally plausible explanation. He has back spasms. That's why I missed the game. That's why I missed the Bournemouth game. That's why I missed the trip to Ukraine. Which is worse for Arsenal long term? That Mesut Ozil had a massive falling out with the coach and is pouting and refused to show up, or that Mesut Ozil has chronic back problems that are going to cause him to miss huge stretches of games and potentially deteriorate physically? Which is the worst scenario for us?
I think they both add up to the same thing, really. I mean, you could say if the situation is that he's pouting a little bit, then maybe that affects the morale of the squad, but it doesn't really look like it to me at the moment.
You could turn around, right? I mean, theoretically, that's recoverable. If he's broken, you can't fix him.
No, exactly. And I don't think that him pouting would, lots of pouty players get transfers. That doesn't seem to put people on. It might make them think about the price, but, it doesn't tend to put people off. But it's definitely a situation, isn't it? And it has been for the whole year, really, from the colds, the back spasms, the falling out with the manager at training, which I told you at the time was absolutely true, came from a very, very well sourced place.
It's hard to debate it at this point, I think you'd have to say.
Yeah. So there is an issue there that needs to be dealt with one way or another. I think what Paul said earlier in the podcast is true, and we should be careful not to, because the narrative's swinging with every game, isn't it? And there's always, because of the nature of our attack, there's always going to be at least 2 players who don't play. Basically, look at all that firepower we had at this game, and Ozil wasn't even in the 18. It's crowded up there, and it's almost analogous to the top 6 at the moment. There's 6 really good teams there, and the 2 that finish outside the top 4 are going to be disaster, in crisis, rubbish, everything needs.
Yeah, and they're going to have 78 points. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of like that with Arsenal's attack at the moment. Every game, there's going to be 1 or 2 players who either don't play or get a little cameo, or maybe don't play at their absolute best. And it's, they're rubbish. We got to get rid of them. We got to do this. We got to do that. And I've done that at times this season, and I've gone, oh no, yeah, we must play like this all the time. We must play Aubameyang and Lacazette together. We must, we must play 2 like inside forwards, and actually what we're seeing is it changes from game to game. So and I remember doing the Leicester podcast when we had a whole purring over Ozil section, and rightly so, because it was probably the best individual performance of the season. So I'm wary about going overboard and saying right, that's it, he's rubbish, get rid of him and all of this. I do think there's been something brewing there all season, and it's probably a situation we need to address. Maybe with some measure of finality, but like I say, I'm still open-minded about it, because I'm completely open to the idea that he'll go and play, I don't know, Liverpool away maybe in a couple of weeks, and he'll take them apart, and everyone will say, see, we must play Ozil all the time, we must build it around him. I think what the bottom line is at the moment is we're not getting the best out of him often enough. And what the reasons for that are really maybe not quite immaterial, but they're not that important. The situation we've got is, by hook or by crook, we've got this really talented player that is on a lot of money. He's 30, so if we don't want him, that's hard to shift. But for one reason or another, we can't get him on the pitch often enough, and whether that's because his back's playing up, or whether it's because he's been told he's on the bench and he said, fuck off, I'm not sitting on the bench, it's kind of immaterial. Either way, we've got an issue and it needs solving. I agree with you. I think it would be preferable if it was, just a kind of, he doesn't really like this new regime, which can happen. Whether Emery wants to play with that type of number 10, you could understand it from Ozil's point of view if he thinks this team isn't really moving in my direction anymore. And you look at the way they played in this game, and it isn't on that. Ozil wouldn't have been able to do the things that we did against Spurs. That doesn't mean he's useless for every game, far from it, but he wouldn't have been able to do that. And obviously that means that one way or another we're not getting value for the money that we've put in. And honestly, given the choice, I'd rather have let Ozil go and perhaps put a little bit more in the Ramsey package, but I'm fairly relaxed about both of them going if it means getting 2 players in who kind of fit what we want to do more often. Yeah. Because at the moment what we're saying is that they're kind of both cameo players, which given the level of talent they have and the wages that comes with is probably not ideal. But yeah, we've got a situation there, and I don't think it's going away anytime quickly.
Yeah, look, you know how Manchester City are buying the league, right? They have 0 players that make more than Mesut Ozil. Okay, Kevin De Bruyne supposedly makes $350 a week, which is what Ozil supposedly makes. They have no one that makes more than that. It's not to say Mesut Ozil is a bad player. When you commit to a 30-year-old on $350,000 a week, that is a determination that player can be not just influential for you, but can be the difference between mediocrity and exceptionalism, right? And so he has to be evaluated at that level. And any thought that we're going to move him on, I mean, I've seen people being like, oh, we'll sell him to Inter. Since when can Inter Milan pay £350,000 a week wages? Let alone, I mean,
they won't have to, right? Because we'll have to pay part of that to get rid of him.
Well, right. So if we want to get rid of him, we're going to have to eat part of his contract and then probably take a vastly reduced transfer fee. And that's where I'm going to get to my question for you, Clive, to wrap this up, which is, look, we just played arguably our best game of the season, or maybe inarguably, and we did it without Mesut Ozil. Does that mean Mesut Ozil isn't good? No, of course he's good. But what it means is we can be the best version of ourselves without him. And if you can be the best version of yourself without your most expensive player, then you need to think about moving on that player and replacing him with players that really move the needle. Because Mesut Ozil's wages could be 2 or even 3 supremely talented young players that form the backbone of a future Arsenal, that solve our problems at the wing, that solve our problems at center back, that become the left back that we desperately need. This is not a referendum on whether he's good. He is clearly good. And on his day, he can be the best playmaker in the world. But I don't know that mercurial number 10 in a 4-3-3 is a player that Emery needs or wants, and we're paying him all the money. So, Clive, I mean, if there was someone willing to take him off of us, is there? I mean, for you, this almost feels like a layup. But if someone was willing to take him off of our hands, would you sell him?
Well, I would. Well, you know my thoughts, right? I don't believe in players staying too long. I think we have to be much more comfortable with renewal. I've been saying it for years. You need to show teams something else. You can't keep doing the same things. Well, I say that while recognizing that, in my opinion, Mesut Ozil is our most talented footballer. Without one of the most top 5 talented footballers I've ever seen live. Right? That doesn't mean he's right for Arsenal right now. Now, if potentially we could have been in a situation where we're paying Ramsey $250 and Ozil $350, that's £600,000 a week wages going to 2 players that are not going to improve. That is not smart business, right? You need to create room to renew your club. So I think we're all in the position that potentially this needs to change. Ozil, for me, just lacks a little bit of intensity. Football's not only about intensity. There are other days we need something else. I look at it slightly differently. I look at it from a squad perspective. I look at what the squad needs. The squad probably needs defenders that we all know about, but we definitely need a fast left-footed forward, and we could probably do with a attacking midfielder that carries the ball, that with speed, with an end product. And I think that's what the squad needs. And if these 2 players are not providing that ability and intensity and ball carrying ability, then we need to move forward. But that's not a bad thing. It's just a period in our history that we need to move on from. And I think we should be getting more comfortable with it. And I'm with Tim. I don't want to, after the Leicester game, come on, guys, we've watched football for years. Have you ever seen anything like that? I mean, that was ridiculous, right? But since then, he's not shook a leg, and he's comfortable taking the money and with a dodgy haystack, right? So it's not like that's not what we want from your supposed franchise player. He should be setting examples, and it's the same rules for me when I judge Ramsey. If I think a player's been far too individual and think about themselves ahead of the team, it's the same for him. Despite his talent, we need a collective, and we saw what a collective could do versus Spurs. The collective is very, very strong, and that to me looks like Arsenal. That's what it looks like to me, and everything about it, even the fighting. That's the Arsenal that I know, and I loved it.
And I mean, it is a reminder that modern football, maybe more than ever before, is so tactical and so meticulous that no matter how talented the player, if they are not the fit for the approach, they do not help the team. I think 10, 15 years ago, the team with the most talent quite frequently was the team that finished on top. Ferguson had a real edge because maybe he understood some of the things that are only being understood now. And Wenger, I think had an edge with fitness and preparation, and certainly, acquiring talent from France. But we're seeing this. I mean, Mesut Ozil is undeniably talented, but we can set up our team to be more successful at times without him. And so, if your perspective is he definitely has back spasms, this isn't some nefarious thing, there's nothing else going on, you're entitled to that opinion. But it doesn't necessarily mean that we should be holding on to him, because that's still a lot of money being spent on a guy who can't be available regularly. And that we aren't Manchester City. Look, you could say we have a billionaire owner. Well, he's not putting money in. I can't call him up. You can't call him up and say, put some money in. So we have to work within this framework. I mean, Tim, last question for you. If he could go, would you want to see that happen? Not because you don't like him, but in the best interest of the club, would you move him on if it was possible?
Yeah, definitely. I just sense it's kind of that time. Do you know what I mean? That it's probably best for both parties, probably best for him to do something else, get a little bit more out of his comfort zone. And I like, if we could get good money and reinvest it, then yeah, I'd be okay with that. I think we'd struggle to buy a player as talented as he is, but I think we'd be able to maybe buy one that fits a little bit more. And it just kind of seems like to me that maybe the Ozil era, as it were, should have ended with the Wenger era. It seems like from what we're hearing that he's not really taking to Emery's methods or his style, and that's understood. Not everyone's going to. I've been saying since the summer, since before Emery took a coaching session, at least two big heads are going to roll in that attack, and we already know one of them. If we could get a decent amount of money, I'd do it. I'm not necessarily sure it's that straightforward, though.
I totally agree, and I think that there's maybe more twists in this tale, but we will see. And Tim is going to have a preview of the Manchester United game on Patreon, so I'm not going to ask him about it. We are going to do a live broadcast tomorrow to talk about the Manchester United game, just sort of a live chat. Tim will have his Patreon-only preview video, which is reason enough to sign up because they are fantastic. Thanks to Laszlo Phillip for the graphics. Clive will leave with this. No Xhaka. What do you think he will and should do lineup-wise for United away?
I'd like to see back three again. Mustafi went off, so I haven't seen if he's really injured. I hope he's...
If he's not, you stick with the back three or no?
If he's fit, I'd stick with back three, definitely. And I would go... I do see Guendouzi as the Xhaka replacement. And so I would go with Guendouzi. But
he started against City, right? Like, there's no reason to think he can't start against United.
Yeah, but it is one to watch, though. There's a bit of me that's thinking Old Trafford's not the place for inexperienced players. But there's a bit of me saying this kid doesn't care about experience. He just wants to go out there and play. I think if we do play him, I do see Mkhitaryan and Iwobi starting, and having that sort of square is a good, nice cradle to put him into, and give him options to spread the play. So that's what I would do. I imagine that I know Mkhitaryan only played half a game, and if it was planned, great, because he's going back to Old Trafford. He's not going to go there and play bad, so that could be really interesting. Again, Iwobi did nothing wrong. I think he suits the start of games because we get control, and let's see what happens. I do think one of the forwards may start on the bench, and it may be Lacazette again. But that's where we are since we lost Danny Welbeck, and that's a real shame. And that's how we got to manage December. What we do now will get us through that Christmas week with those two players intact, and we need that until January comes along. And you saw what Vertonghen did yesterday to Lacazette. That could easily have been a 2-monther.
Yeah.
And if that had happened, we are in big trouble. And that's how quickly a season can turn, right? So we've got to be conservative, play one of these strikers, make sure we don't play both of them for the full 90 minutes, because otherwise we're going to lose one of them at a crucial stage in the season.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you this much. United are bad, and we're going to fucking smash them. So I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be great. So, yeah, I think that's all we need to say about that. Tim's on Twitter at Stilberto. Thanks, Tim.
My pleasure as always.
Clive's on Twitter at ClivePAFC. Thanks, Clive.
Thank you very much.
My name's Elliot Smith. You can block me on Twitter, Yankee Gunner. Give us a 5-star review. Write nasty things about Paul, especially Paul, and only Paul in the comments. We will do a live broadcast tomorrow. It may take you until kickoff at Manchester United to listen to this podcast, so who knows what you'll have time for. I just want to say how much we appreciate you, as always. This was a wonderful, wonderful day, this win, and it was a wonderful chance to relive it with these very intelligent and thoughtful people, myself excluded. We are looking forward to coming back and talking about the United win on Thursday, which is when we will release the next podcast. But in the interim, make sure you go sign up for Patreon. Come on, it's Christmas. That can be 'tis the season, and then you can get Tim's previews and our In the Spotlight. We're either going to do Torreira or Aubameyang next, so you'll want to look forward to that. And that'll be coming up in the not-too-distant future. In any event, up the Arsenal. Here we go. Old Trafford. Break the hoodoo. We will talk to you after Arsenal 10, United 0.